Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody. We're going to get started here shortly, just waiting a couple more minutes for more folks to come in. And pretty soon we'll be reviewing some of the norms for how our office hours will work. But again, we'll start in just a few minutes. Good afternoon, everybody. We're really glad that you are all here. It looks like we don't have everyone in yet, but we can go ahead and get started just in the interest of time. My name is Natalie Flores, and here we are hosting our first Early Childhood Education office hours with the topic of pre-K through second grade assessment. So I'm going to go over a couple of norms around, how this will all work and how to get your question answered, as well as help you figure out how to use your GoToWebinar control panel in case you are unfamiliar with it. So let's see. As you settle in, we'd really love to know who you are and where you're from and what your role is. So within the chat questions box that you have inside of your control panel, which I'll show you in just a second, you can introduce yourself. Unless you've already found it, then you can go ahead and add it there. Just ensure that you're muted. There's going to be a little microphone on the right-hand side. If it's green, we can hear you. And if it's red, we cannot. So if you're not speaking, we just kindly ask that you mute yourself so that way we can get others to chime in and make sure there's not a whole lot of other kind of background noise and feedback. And like I said, topic of discussion, pre-K through second grade assessment. And today we're joined by myself. Mary Ellen, do you want to say hello?
Yes, thank you. It's good to see everybody here, and I will be looking at your questions and in the chat box as we do, and reading questions you have one.
Thank you. And Tamala, we're also joined by Tamala, who essentially is the wizard of all things pre-K at TEA. Tamala, do you want to say hello?
Hi there. I'm not sure if I've ever been called a wizard of all things pre-K before, but that's fine. I love it. We are so glad you're here today. We're excited about these and hoping that we can answer a lot of good questions. And anyway, welcome.
Great, thank you. Okay, so like I said, we'll just do a couple of GoToWebinar functions. The box that you see on the right-hand side, we're calling it your control panel. So like I said, if it's red or this orangey color, it means that you're muted and we can't hear you. If it's green, it means we can hear you. And you have a questions chat feature right here. You can type in anything you'd like, although we do recommend that if you have a question, you please just use your voice unless you really don't want to, and then you can go ahead and type it in. So just a couple of norms and expectations. This is not a formal training necessarily. It is not an information session in so many ways where we just give you a lot of information without a lot of discussion. This is a place where you get to ask your questions related to the topic being discussed, and then we provide some guidance on that. We encourage you to use the raise hand feature to let us know when you have a question, and that way we can call on you. Although if the group is going to remain small and it leans toward being more of a discussion, I think we might end up just unmuting ourselves so we can have a nice conversation. So if you do use the raise hand feature, just make sure you lower it back down again once your question has been answered. That way we know who to move on to next. This session is recorded, and it will be posted on our data-driven instruction website, on the TEA website. And I will go ahead, actually, Mary, if possible, Mary or Scott, because I know Scott's in here too. If one of you can add the web address for the website in the questions chat box, that way people can have it and they can easily copy paste. So yeah, those are our norms and expectations. And again, here is the website, but we'll add that to the chat box shortly. So just wanted to know what kind of questions, were on your mind, any concerns that you might have, and hopefully we can get this started. So
Okay, I did copy the website for the data-driven instruction into the chat and send it to everybody.
Thank you so much. I see that now. Okay, any questions so far from the audience? And it looks like some people, let's see. I'm just reading some of the roles you all have. Thank you for joining us. Robin, Sylvia, Jen, wonderful to have you guys here. Thank you. What could online testing for CLI for pre-K look like? Ooh, good question. And this one comes from the one of our friends in, oh, sorry, I thought it had the region. I don't want to say her name in case you don't want me to say it out loud. So, all right. Well, CLI Engage is actually hosting on August 12th a training on how to navigate the circle assessment. So I highly recommend checking them out. I often find the easiest way to go to their registration for webinars is to check out their calendar section, and there you can go ahead and put in your credentials so that you can watch the webinar. But CLI Engage has worked really, really hard, especially over the summer as we all see this kind of moving forward, in making sure that assessments can be done remotely, at least to some extent. So with any kind of pre-K assessments, I would also want to check in on the vendor. If you're not using CLI or Circle, and maybe you're using like a Teaching Strategies Gold or work sampling system, I highly recommend speaking with the vendor to ask those types of questions So that way you have a more direct answer for what that looks like for them specifically. Another thing that I would encourage you to look at is that pre-K assessments are, still very family oriented. You can still use data collected from families to kind of progress monitor what's going on with kids, especially if they're not in your classroom. So definitely check out what each vendor has in terms of their capabilities for family engagement and families as data collectors as well. So we have a lot of questions that came in through chat. We do want to encourage you to please say them out loud too. So if you want to have more of a dialogue around it, it's much easier for us to navigate these conversations in dialogue rather than just reading from the questions. So let's see if someone's raised their hand so far. Great. Robin Hernandez, you have a question. Would you like to unmute and ask? Maybe I can go ahead and unmute you.
Okay, I think you got it now. It was telling me I couldn't unmute. Okay. So on that note, are K through 2 still going to be expected and required to do their beginning of the year testing if they are remote? So is there going to be a requirement change on that or not?
So did you mention first 20 days? Is that what I heard?
Well, I know the first 20 days is for first grade, correct? Because they weren't able to do the dyslexia test last year. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it's kind of like a two-part question. So, and I'm sorry if you didn't originally ask about the 20 days. It's obviously very much on my mind. So yes, BOY screening is absolutely still a requirement. The commissioner has approved 2 kindergarten screeners that are also free and capable of remote screening. So if you are using M-Class Texas Edition, they have wonderful webinars and guidance on how to administer these remotely if you need to. And then, like I said, CLI Engage also has some guidance around how to use the TextKia along with TPRI Tejas Lay for how to administer these remotely. So the expectations are the same, but again, your BOY assessment windows are essentially locally decided upon. So let's say if you decided to start school in the middle of July, then obviously your window is going to be different from a district that decides to start school maybe in mid-September. Does that help answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Another thing to consider is that part of HB3 was that you have to notify parents in writing of those results within 60 days of giving the literacy screener. And so you really want to backward plan from your parent conferences so that you make sure that you're within that 60-day window so that at the conference, the teacher can hand the parent and explain to the parent the results.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Mary. And somebody corrected me in the questions. Thank you. The pre-K webinar for CLI is actually on August 11th. On the 13th is when they have, I believe it's TPR Tejas Lay, and then on the 12th will be TextKia. And feel free to raise your hand if you have a question. This is, again, a really helpful discussion to have with all of you. The more we hear from you, the more we're able to support you.
Okay, well, I was trying to give everybody else a chance, but I have another question.
Go ahead, Robin.
Okay, so the first and second grade test, I know, pre-K and kinder is going into ECDS. What do they do with their first and second grade results? Can you remind me of that, please?
Mary, would you like to take this one?
I can take this one, yes. Yeah. They use this information to make instructional decisions about how to whether to provide interventions or not. And then there is a fall PEAM submission for the early reading indicator code. And then in the spring, there's a summer reading, early reading indicator code that K through 2 all have to enter as to what action you took as a district based on the data that you collected. And not just, you know, your summative data that is your progress monitoring, but also your formative data and what decisions you made. And then the dyslexia code for first grade has to be completed by January 31st. And then you enter that into PEAMS in the dyslexia code as to what decision you made. And that is in the summer. And then the early reading indicator has to be entered in the summer as well, based on your spring assessment and what decisions you made about that child. Does that answer your question?
Yes, and that early indicator code, I know there are like 2 or 3 choices there, right? It's either they did not need intervention or they needed intervention. Can you remind me of those?
I think it's called, you provided accelerated instruction, which means interventions. You're right, there's 3 choices, and I think one is that no accelerated instruction is necessary, and so accelerated instruction was given to the child, or the child was not assessed.
That's right. Okay, so I do remember that wording, Mary, and so I had a question last year. So accelerated instruction is intervention, right?
Well, that's the way I look at it. I can verify that. Does anybody know any different that is
Because
on?
I remember a district asked me, and they said, well, is that like GT because it's accelerated? And then I was like, no, I thought it was, and we had like this whole discussion on what exactly accelerated instruction meant.
Well, I'm going to write that down, and I'm going to, if nobody here knows the answer, because that's the way I interpreted it, but I want to be able to make sure that I'm right.
Right, that's how we interpreted it too, but it was like, once she asked me, I kind of had to second guess myself, and I wanted to make sure.
Yeah. Because I think the purpose is to find kids that need support. And that's why the commissioner or the governor in his part of his waiver for the dyslexia screener in the spring understood that this whole group of kindergartners were not screened. And so he wanted to make sure that these kids are not going to fall through the cracks this fall. And that the kids that need instruction, that need support, are going to be identified.
Thank you.
Mary, this is Scott Bodner. I was going to jump in also and say I believe that's the correct understanding, or the correct application of that within PEAMS, is that it is meant to indicate the need for additional intervention for those children. But as Mary said, we'll double check just to make 100% sure.
Thank you. And Scott is our manager within the early childhood division. So thank you, Scott, for being here. We have more questions. So I thought I saw Joanna's hand go up first, and then I have Claudia coming up next. So Joanna, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, I have been getting some questions about when the hybrid sample school model will come out for PreK.
Let's see. Well, I think since this topic is primarily around assessments, are you asking about how assessments work into that, or do you just have questions in general about how that model is going to look? Let me try to, it looks like you're self-muted, Joanna, so if you want to provide some clarity, you just unmute yourself. And I think we're clicking unmute at the same time, so hold on. There we go. Okay.
Okay, there I am.
Thanks for being patient with us, guys.
I was trying to unclick it. No, actually, it's just a general question. I may have asked it in the wrong section. But when we get to that, that would be a question that I have been getting a lot of requests about in regards to that hybrid model.
You're essentially asking how it's going to work and counting towards attendance, or?
So, well, no, there are some districts still wanting to adjust their hybrid school model. And so on the Strong Start website, you know how there's been different guidance that has come out on like the remote model for pre-K. So I've been getting some questions about the hybrid school model, and I think everything kind of plays into that. So they're just trying to finalize their hybrid school model, and we're wondering when the pre-K guidance would come out in general.
Thank you.
We can't give guidance on, I mean, the guidance we have is the same guidance you have on the COVID. You can send an email to, and I'll write this in the chat, disasterinfo@tea.texas.gov with that kind of question and get an answer from them.
This is Joanna, that is a great question, because you are right. All of the hybrid models are posted on the Strong Start website except for pre-K. And I just checked it. It's not there yet, and we do not know when it will be posted.
Okay, thank you, Tamala.
Hopefully, it says coming soon, emphasis on soon, we hope.
Thank you, Joanna.
And I put that email address in the chat for you all.
Okay, Claudia, it says you are self-muted. Can you unmute? And then I will also unmute you because you're next. All right, go ahead, Claudia.
Okay, so I had the same question that Joanna had, so you answered some of it, but also with M-class and circle assessments, what are the suggested start dates for beginning of the year, middle of the year, and end of the year?
That's a good question. So it really is going to depend on when you begin the year. And generally, districts are the ones who decide what their assessment windows will be for that year. And we do recommend that, you know, you think of these dates in mind with parent-teacher conferences, holidays, things like that. But again, we don't have strict assessment windows. Mary, do you want to add a little to it, or Tamala?
Well, I like to look at it as, like, say, you start with backward planning and you look at holidays and you look at what your 9-week periods are for elementary, and when report cards are due, because you don't want teachers doing extra assessment.
Okay.
Another thing to think about, this is Tamala, is remember this BOY and EOY data does go in, at least for pre-K, does go into a public-facing report, a TPIA report. And so it is best for the district to do BOY as early in the school year as you can, before the little kiddos are learning a whole lot, and to do EOY as late as you possibly can, so that your district, it shows that your children have made great improvement from BOY to EOY. And then I would definitely agree with Natalie and Mary. You need to go look at what does the vendor say about the window for assessing. And then just remember, the younger the child, the more time it will take for them to be acclimated to going to school, because it might be the first time they've ever gone to school. And so you don't want to do the assessment too early. So it's a balance. There's a lot of things to consider. Great question.
I have a quick update for everyone. I put 2 links in the question chat box. One to the just the exact verbiage that is used for the early reading indicator, and I just posted one that's to a calendar that Mary and Natalie created that shows some recommendations, best practices, along with requirements in calendar form over the course of the school year.
Thank you, Scott. Yes, and all of those can be found on our data-driven instruction website, which is the link that I believe it was Mary that posted it into the chat questions box. So you can find those under best practices too. And just so you all know that the website that we've created, the data-driven instruction website, is continually growing. So it'll kind of look different, a little bit different week to week as we add more information in. So I would, if I were you, I would really bookmark it, save it, and make sure that you check on it regularly. That way you can have more information around assessments and guidance. So I don't see any other hands up, but I'm sure there are other questions around. Sylvia, I will go ahead and unmute you. There you go.
Awesome. Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so thank you so much for that information. I was actually given that website, that exact, website that to find the suggested windows. And I know that I think at least we have for kinder and first grade. I was told that for the pre-K 1, it was still work in process. I think I had a conversation with the wonderful Mary, I believe it was last week or the week before. So I don't know, because it wasn't ready, but when we spoke, it was actually, we were messaging. So I don't know if it's already ready, the one for pre-K, by any chance, and even if it's for pre-K 3s and pre-K 4s.
I'm gonna let Tamara
we just started working. Yeah, we started working on that last week, so it is not complete at this point.
Do you know more or less when will it be ready, by any chance?
I mean, I would assume it'll be ready by the end of this week, but I would say next week for sure.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have any, I'm keeping an eye on these little hands that go up, but has anything come in through the questions box that some of the other panelists might see?
There's a question here. It says, for pre-K, is it required to meet with parents a specific amount of days after the assessment? Is this for every wave or just the BOY? That is just a requirement for the other grades. That is not a requirement for pre-K.
It's just a requirement for kindergarten.
Yeah, and the requirement is that you provide some sort of written response or written documentation around how that child did on their literacy screener. So you don't have to meet with them in person. Okay. And I think I see Claudia has another question. So Claudia, I'll unmute you. Go ahead.
Yes. Can you put on the chat box that link that you mentioned or someone mentioned earlier, where we can ask questions about the hybrid model for pre-K and the minutes, attendance requirements and all that?
I believe that's the disaster info at tea.texas.gov. You can go ahead and add it in there too.
And there was a comment from someone that they've had difficulty getting an answer from that, but I believe that when they get it, they, whoever they are, but the people that are dealing with this guidance then will actually put the guidance, make sure that it's clear in the guidance. Does that make sense?
Yeah, some questions unfortunately don't have a clear-cut, straight answer because there are so many moving pieces as we're tracking COVID. So they do have to ensure that the answer that they provide you is written the same as it is elsewhere, if that's what you meant, Mary.
Yes.
And Sylvia, do you have another question? You can unmute yourself if you do.
No, ma'am, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Joanna, it looks like you have a question. I can go ahead and unmute you. There you go.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I did receive a question about providing the assessment results to parents. So if districts are using or charters are using the assessments on CLI Engage, Could they create their own parent report of how the children did, or do they have to use the report that comes directly from the system?
The TextKia does have an excellent report. It's brand new this year with added features to it. We're going to be doing a series of webinars, and I'll let Natalie speak to that in just a minute, but one of them is communicating reports, and we're going to be including both the M-Class and the TextKia links to how to download those and what is in each one and what is best practice in communicating that. But a written report does have to be delivered, if that was put in HB3 of the literacy screener in kindergarten that Natalie had mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I will say the CLI Engage reports, especially for TextKia that they've come out with this year, are really, really, really helpful. It's very easy to read. It's very clear. They're also available in Spanish. So if you have, let's say, a fully bilingual child and the teacher administered the screener in English, but the parents of that child speak Spanish, you can also provide the results in Spanish, even if they, did the screener in a different language. What's nice about it, this is my favorite part, and that I would have absolutely appreciated as a teacher, they have a nice QR code and a web link that they can kind of copy paste or put into their computer or whatever it is, that actually gives specific activities around how the child did on their screener. So let's say they're in the monitor zone, CLI Engage kind of comes up with some suggested activities for parents to try at home, which I think is really nice. But on top of that, yes, teachers can absolutely send another, nice warm message to parents. But I will say on their own, the reports are looking very good.
So just to clarify, I've heard that, CLI does have great reports. I've especially seen the pre-K one because I mostly work with pre-K, but, and then they have those activities to go along with it, and then teachers can send additional information. However, the question I received was initially, do they have to send the report that comes straight out of the system, or can they send their own report and only send their own report?
And my understanding of that is that they have the flexibility to decide what specific report to send. It's not defined in statute that it has to come from the assessment tool, but I will double check on that for you as well.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think, both CLI and Amplify, who they are the vendor for M-Class, they've both been very aware of reports perhaps not being the warmest or fuzziest in the past. And so they've worked very hard, I would say, to make those reports stand alone. So that way, as a teacher, you do feel confident giving them to parents and you don't feel like it's written in jargon that they may not understand. So I hope that helps.
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. And I don't see any new hands going up. So please, if you haven't asked any of your questions yet, now is a good time. We're about halfway through. And it's disaster info. I just saw another question come up. Disaster info@ta.texas.gov, and that's where you would want to go to get any kind of that information around your hybrid methods of instruction this year. Apologies if I typed in a typo earlier. Okay, Sylvia, looks like you have another question. I'll unmute you. Okay, go
I
ahead.
don't know. I'm sorry, I don't have a question. I think I don't know how to lower my hand. I apologize.
That's okay.
Yeah, it's me. Like, I want to talk. I know it's like I've clicked, but I apologize. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Let me try it again.
Maybe I don't know, maybe I can lower that for you.
Sorry. Thank you.
It's okay. So in case you all haven't seen the website yet, I'll just take this time to go ahead and show you what it looks like. I'll stop presenting here for a minute and show you what our data-driven instruction website looks like. And again, I would bookmark this if I were you. You're going to be able to find a lot of information here, but it's sort of divided into 3 different sections. So we have our requirements page. When you click on the requirements, you'll be able to see.
Can I interrupt really quick?
Sure.
I looked up the statute, and as per 28006 in the Texas Education Code, it does not specify the origin of the report. It just says that you have to report the scores from the assessment to the parents.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. So yeah, if you haven't checked this out, we do have different data collection requirements for pre-K up until 2nd grade. What's nice is that, we added the dyslexia language. We have some language around the COVID waiver and how to download it. And, should you need it for the kindergarten requirement. We also have 1st and 2nd grade. One big piece of information for you all to know in case you haven't heard is that we have extended our work with CLI Engage, which houses TextGIA, and Amplify with MClass Texas up until 2023. So if you kind of have a district that you're working with that's trying to figure out, I don't know what tool to commit to, but if they change it next year, this is good until 2023. So it's just good to keep that in mind, especially now as they have all these different types of suggestions, guidance around remote instruction. And if we go back, I want to show you a little bit about what Mary and I were talking about. We're going to skip from requirements to the best practices in professional development. This is where a series of videos are going to live that we are calling our data-driven instruction series. And it's essentially an 8-part video series. The videos are not terribly long. They're maybe about 30 minutes, maybe 40 minutes each. Really going through how to use your specific data that you collect and how to move it into your instruction. So the first set of videos are essentially going to focus on K-2. And then after those videos are done, we're going to create some videos for pre-K and what that looks like. And then we are going to extend down to 0 to 3. So this is sort of a year's worth of work for us that we're really, really excited about, and just hoping to get teachers sort of passionate about using all those reports that they see in their assessment tools and using them to individualize their instruction.
And a lot of thanks goes to Scott for developing this page and keeping it up to date for all of us.
Yep, thank you, Scott. Robin, it looks like you have a question.
Kind of. This has been something that's been going round and round in my head, so I just wanted to see your thoughts on it. But by the way, I do want to tell you, I go to that data-driven instruction website a lot, so it's been very helpful. So thank you for adding that.
Thank you.
But my question, well, not slash thoughts are, I went to both the Texas KIA training and the MClass training. And Texas KIA is, their subtests are letter knowledge, vocabulary, and spelling. Like in that one, the kids actually take a spelling test, like a CBC spelling test, right?
Yes.
That's correct.
Yeah, in MClass, they don't do that, right? It's different. They do letter naming, phoneme, segmenting, nonsense word fluency, and word reading. So the way they're tested is just kind of different. And so I guess I've just been having a hard time with that in my head. Like in the end, though, it's just going to be the composite score that gets sent, correct, for the screener. And that's what we're going to see for whether they were kindergarten ready or not, regardless of what test they use or which assessment they use. It would just be that composite score.
Yes.
That's correct.
Okay. It's just I've been going back and forth about that because like one is a written spelling test and one is not, and is that going to cause, you know, discrepancies in how kids are doing on which test that they do? And I don't know, I just wanted your thoughts on that, maybe a little bit on is that going to affect scores by which test that they choose?
It should not, because both are scientifically research-based, and both vendors have laid out that that this will predict if they are on track, and the terms are different for both. But really, what you want to focus with the parents is either in TextKia, it's on track, monitor, which means approaching on track, or need support. And in M class, it's well above grade level, above grade level. Natalie, can you think of the next two?
Ooh, it's on their website. You can check it out. Essentially, they have 4 categories. It's like well above grade level, meets expectations, and below expectations. Don't quote me on the exact language, but it is essentially those 4 levels. And then CLI for TextKia, they have 3 different ones, which are on track, monitor, and need support. So it is interesting, Robin, when you think about it. You're like, how come one tests some things and the other one tests the other things? Essentially, they're all getting to the same place. They just have different ways of getting there to determine what a high quality composite score is. The other thing is they're 2 totally different assessment types. So the research and development is different. So M class is based on Dibble's 8th edition. And then TextKia essentially is using its own. It's not like a Dibble's. It's a little bit different.
Well, and go ahead, Natalie.
Oh, no, I'm done.
Well, and I think the message that we want to give and the intent from the legislators, and because I heard the commissioners say this as we were all talking about this after it became law last summer, is that we want to get good information into teachers' hands fast, and so that they can start those interventions immediately on these kiddos that need support, because it just makes sense if we can make that paradigm shift to districts that let's start interventions when they're in kinder or absolutely when they're in pre-K. Then by the time you get to 3rd grade, you're not going to have, you're still going to have kids that need interventions in 3rd grade, but you shouldn't have as many if we can get those interventions started early. And so the intent really was to provide good information, accurate information quickly to teachers so that they can start to close those gaps. But what I like to point out, and I point out in the training, is that you need to know who's well above grade level that Dibbles is going to tell you, or the M class Texas is going to tell you. You need to look at the benchmarks in TextKia, and if on track, the benchmark is 2. So if a child has scored 14 or 15, that teacher needs to know that information as well, so that they're providing enrichment for that child so that they don't get bored, so that they are moving forward as well. So it all is a puzzle piece for us to put together for each child to provide the appropriate instructional level, informing instruction.
Thank you for talking that out with me. I wrote down a bunch of your words there, so thank you.
Yeah, and if we just keep that in mind, this is to help teachers. It's not a checkoff. If they check it off and never look at or use the information, it's a waste of time for everybody. We really want teachers using this information so that these kids start closing this gap early.
Mm-hmm. Yep, thanks, Mary. And hence, that's the whole reason behind the data-driven instruction series. And we're in development right now. Mary's working on 2 videos. I'm working on a few videos as well. So they will all be available, I would say, in September, probably closer to the end of September. But what's nice is that Mary's video around reports is really going to help people understand, what do I do with this? How do I read a report? What does it mean to me? And how do I group my kids? How do I provide more individualized instruction? What was it about that specific screening for that child that I feel like I need more information on?
Yeah. Well, I like to think of a student that scores monitor on TextKia who's approaching benchmark. You probably need to do a couple tier 1 and tier 2 interventions with that child. Check for understanding, put some things into centers that you can sit down and do a little direct instruction or observation of how they're doing. It's that need support child that is going to need specific interventions from the teacher or from a reading specialist or a language arts specialist. Could be he needs vocabulary. So how maybe you as a district need to provide some PD on how to build vocabulary in an authentic way. It's just the data. If we all look at the data from the superintendent's office to the principal's office to the teacher as to how we can get these kids clicking along the way we know all the kids want to, and we want their teachers want them to, as well as their families.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? We have just a little over 15 minutes left. So feel free to ask anything at all that's sort of, Robin, that was a really good example of, I don't have a question necessarily, but something that's been circling around in my mind. This is the opportunity. This is why we created these office hours to, kind of address any of those issues that might be floating around for you. I'm just going to take a quick peek into the questions, see if anyone has typed anything.
Answer the disaster info questions directly. I don't have knowledge of that, how they handle that. But we did get feedback that someone had not received an answer on that, a direct answer.
My understanding is, this is Tamala, that they use the questions that are asked to create the frequently asked questions that are on the website. I do not think, notice I said think, that answer each question individually with the person that requested the information. I do not think they do that. I have not heard of that happening. I think they use it to try to figure out what part of all of that information on those websites is still confusing. And then they try to use that to clarify things. So it's really good if you do put in questions to that email address, because that will raise it to the level that they'll notice, oh, this is still confusing.
Yes. Yeah, I have heard that too, Tamara. Thank you. Yeah, I think that is sort of what might be going on, just to add a little bit more clarity to where there is none, or actually just not enough. So if there aren't any questions, I did want to show you guys our tool selection guide. Again, this is pre-K all the way up until 2nd grade. And what's really nice is that each of these have kind of been sort of divided up for you. So we have pre-kindergarten. We have the commissioner's list of approved instruments available through that link as well. Here's a quick screenshot. We have kindergarten. We know a lot of you are trying to decide, should I, if I'm not using TextKia or M-Class, should we? Is this a good year to start? And so any questions that you might have around what's their training like, what's student progress monitoring going to look like for the rest of the year, you can actually find on this really helpful table that Scott created. So there's robust opportunities for educator training on both vendor websites. They also, again, provide very specific guidance and help around remote assessments, which is really nice to have. Instructional support, and they also provide some language around how they meet the dyslexia requirements as well. And if you are working at a school who's really interested in you know what, we really want something that's going to work for us all the way up through 5th grade, maybe you take a look at M-Class Texas Edition, or if maybe you want something just for the early grades, then maybe you want to take a closer look at CLI Engage as well. Looks like we have a question. Robin, do you have another question? And it's okay to keep asking. You can just unmute yourself.
No, I didn't. Sorry. No.
Okay. I will say, if you're a lot like me and think of things like in the middle of the night instead of when it's a good time to ask them, you can always email us. That is totally okay. So I'm going to put our contact information up here so that way you can see it. Let me go into present mode. So you can always email us at earlychildhoodeducation@tea.texas.gov for any kind of early childhood related inquiries. If you have specific questions around data submission, and we know those questions do come up, you can email us at ecds@tea.texas.gov. I am in that inbox a lot, so you will most likely be hearing from me. And Kelly, it looks like you have a question.
Yes, I just have a quick question. Sorry to ask about the disaster email again, but just to make sure, if the question that we submit to the disaster email, we just have to keep checking back to the FAQs to see if the question's been answered. And that being said, when we have specific questions from our districts and we reach out to our early childhood contacts, we've been told to submit that to the disaster email. If we never get a response though from the disaster email, it makes it a little bit difficult to follow up with our constituents who asked the specific question. So that being said, would it be better to email the early childhood education at tea.texas.gov for those questions? I'm just trying to find out the best way to get support when we have these specific questions about the guidance and we don't seem to be getting an answer back from the disaster website or email address.
The trouble is, and Scott can talk to this too, is we can't give any more guidance on COVID than what is on the website. We're happy to answer early childhood questions in this, and Natalie and I do the assessment questions. Tamala helps with a lot of the pre-K. We will do everything we can to get an answer for you.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Sorry, Kelly. I was just going to add that we're very limited in what we can interpret and provide any sort of nuanced answers to. Certainly, if there's a specific question that we feel is critical, we can reach out to leadership and see if we can get some interpretation. But I can't promise you that we would be able to provide anything, for across the board. It's really out of our control. We'll do the best we can, but we have limited access to essentially making those decisions as far as how things are interpreted.
Okay, thank you both so much for that clarification. That is definitely helpful. So we'll start by directing our questions to y'all, to your team. And then if it is something that's specifically COVID related and y'all need to direct us to the disaster email, then we will follow up in that manner. Is that acceptable?
Okay, I just received an answer to our accelerated reading question, and I'm going to read it to you, and then I will put it in the chat as well. 28006 that supports the guidance says the district shall implement an accelerated reading instruction program that provides reading instruction that addresses reading deficiencies to those students and shall determine the form, content, and timing of that program. The admission, review, and dismissal committee of a student who participates in the district special education program under subchapter B, chapter 29, and who does not perform satisfactorily on a reading instrument under this section shall determine the manner in which the student will participate in an accelerated reading instruction program under this subsection. So yes, it is, it means reading instruction, reading interventions to address deficiencies.
Thank you so much, Mary. And Kelly, in case you have a question that you feel is like COVID related, but you're wondering if we may be able to answer it, something like the COVID waiver, those are things that we can answer in terms of assessment and what that looks like for your district. Again, providing guidance, we can't tell you what to do. We can just support you in the thought process. But if it is, COVID related, see if maybe our early childhood education inbox can answer it. But if not, we will immediately let you know. We won't leave you hanging for too long, and I'll let you know to submit to disaster info if needed.
I just pasted the link to the main COVID guidance page. So from there will be a series of buttons that allow you to look at different categories of guidance, as well as a search bar that they've added that is specific to COVID related guidance.
Thank you. So we have just about a few more minutes here. If you have any last burning questions, please do submit. You can type them in. If you don't want to say them out loud, that's okay. And or now is a good time to raise your hand as we kind of wrap up. I would say, I do want to remind you that we are going to be having a few of these coming up. This is our first, and we're really, really grateful for you all for attending and asking all of your questions or even just listening. We just want to be of support to the field in a way that's really meaningful. And sometimes just having a dialogue is sometimes, obviously the most helpful way around it. So you can look forward to another one of these popping up. It'll be on August 24th. So if you maybe want to tell a friend about it, they don't have to be, at the ESC level. This is open to essentially the entire field, and that includes families as well. So teachers, admin, coaches, families, essentially anyone who has questions around assessment in the early years, pre-K through second grade, we're happy to provide guidance on that. Well, since we're kind of piloting this as well, I do want to say that we have opened this up to the rest of the division. We're going to see how this goes, and then hopefully a little bit later, maybe we'll have one all about, pre-K requirements, and Tamala will lead that one, or we'll have one around waivers, and we'll have another person lead that one. So, so definitely look forward to these, and we're going to be posting them on our website, so that way you know when they are and how to sign up.
Are we going to be sending out a list of these FAQs to our attendees today?
Sure, we can absolutely do that. The goal is to answer as many questions as possible within the office hours. But if there's any that are lingering that did not get answered, we can absolutely send those out. And again, I said this in the beginning, but we are recording this. So if you had a friend that couldn't make it or registration was full, by all means, tell them that the recording will be available on the website. And so that way they can kind of tune in and see if any of their questions match up to the ones you all asked. And I think I just saw a question pop up in the box. It says, regarding the question for online testing for circle progress monitoring, so essentially CLI for pre-K, there is a webinar about remote. Oh, okay, never mind. You're just giving us information on the webinar. Thank you. Okay, well, if there's no other questions, and you'd like a little, couple more minutes left on your hour, you can go ahead and log off. We thank you again for joining us. Feel free to reach out to us whenever you need, and certainly let your friends know about our office hours that we're hosting.